What's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Another gorgeous Wednesday night in Western New York. We're going to enjoy them while we can today. Wednesday, another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast where I am joined by another great guest, a familiar guest to the Thomas Take listeners, Kyle Trimble of BangedUpBills.com. What's going on, Kyle? It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me back, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking with you last. I guess we kind of figured out it was like March or February. Man, I'm losing track of time. I don't know if this is something that happens as you get older or if it's just time passing. You lose track of time. Am I the only one that deals with this?
You definitely do that. I'm not going to say it's early onset Alzheimer's, but I definitely do. I have realized that does happen more often. That just things start blending together, and you're thinking, "Oh, that wasn't that long ago," and you realize 5-6 years or whatever you're looking at. It just things keep on moving faster and faster as you get older. It's kind of scary.
Yeah, they do. They definitely do. I have been wanting to get you back on the show, and opportunity knocked, I guess. Unfortunately, you know you're my injury expert, you're my injury guy, so whenever the Buffalo Bills have an injury, it's like I'm excited to talk to you. I enjoy talking to you, but knowing the reason why you're on the show today, you know, obviously I'm happy to have you on, but I'm a little bit upset, obviously, with the news that Harrison Phillips is out for the season with a torn ACL. To start off from the top of the show, dive into this injury a little bit for me, because as you know, I'm a sports guy, but I'm not necessarily an injury expert like yourself. How did this happen? Is this ACL injury different from others that other players have experienced, or what's the timetable on the recovery for Harrison Phillips as well?
Okay, so there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Diving into the injury itself. We saw something was going on with about minute 50 left in the fourth quarter. He was just playing the ball, or excuse me, not playing the ball, but playing the offensive player, and he just went down. And normally you don't pay attention to anything like that because guys fall down, they slip, things happen. And then he's getting tended to by trainers, and then he kind of jogs off. And then you don't really hear anything until later when they start reporting they went to x-rays. I'm thinking, okay, sometimes they start looking at stuff. No big deal. And then you hear later he's getting an MRI the next day. Okay, all still within relative normalcy there. They just want to get a better look at things. And then the hammer drops. You got the ACL tear, and you're thinking, what the hell just happened? And then more information starts to get leaked out, starts to get reported. Everything goes into this here. And I got to give credit to Thad Brown out in Rochester. He had the best video I've seen of the injury of where we thought it happened at the 150 mark. Thad later came out and showed, I think 2 plays before, where Harrison Phillips was hit and his foot was planted and a body came flying in, gave us the more traditional ACL mechanism of injury, rather than what we thought originally happened with him falling down. When I reviewed the video, I was like, it's kind of there, but that's not really a whole lot of force. And then Thad came out with the other video and said, oh, there it is. And then Harrison even came out and said, hey, I tried playing through it, and that's where he fell down and had to kind of get moved off the field after that. So that encapsulates what happened, why that was also surprising. Overall recovery, we see about 9 to 12 months. It's just one of those things that it just takes a while, because you're not just dealing with healing up the actual structures of the knee. You're trying to get all that function back. With the ACL is so vital for the cutting and for the pivoting, and make sure that the femur is not going to slide over the tibia, so it can control the deceleration movements and whatnot. Like, for example, with all the running you have to do and stopping on a dime and going. So there's a lot of neurological involvement with that. That's where you see a lot of the issues come into play, because that knee needs to send signals back to the brain to say, hey, this is what's happening, and here's how you adjust. You fire the hamstrings, fire the quadriceps, fire the gastroc muscle. And there's so many different things that go into all that stuff. It can't just be a one-way system. It has to be both ways. So there's getting feedback both ways, both from the brain and from the tissues in the knee. So it says 9 to 12 months for recovery, but we've seen them usually take longer from that neurological standpoint. The best case in point is we see a lot of ACL recoveries and people kind of that decline before they get back up to that actual proper play that we usually see. So I think the best example is Trent Murphy. We saw that he just wasn't Trent Murphy last year, but now the dude's an animal flying all over the field, and he looks like he's back to normal. We saw that with Dalvin Cook last year. He just was never 100%. We've seen that with a lot of different guys. They come back from the ACL, but they're just not all there. And I know you mentioned one other part of this, but you have to jog my memory on the third part of the question here.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you actually kind of covered everything. As far as the ACL injury, it's so common. I mean, it's so common in all sports, whether it's football or I see it a lot in MMA. I see it a lot in hockey. You know, you see it soccer, especially more so the grass sports where you got the cleat to the turf or the cleat to the natural grass, or you know that stop, cut, and go can kind of force these knee injuries to happen. I've seen non-contact ACL tears, and then I've seen ACL tears that are very similar to Harrison Phillips, where someone rolls into his leg and his knee, buckles and his knee's, torn. So as far as Harrison Phillips' knee injury specifically, you stated that the timetable of his recovery is somewhere between 9 to 12 months. Is his knee injury, I don't want to say better or worse, but in a way, is it better or worse than others, or is this a knee injury that is typical for an NFL football player?
We don't know the severity of it, better or worse, because we don't know if there's any associated damage.
Right.
When I originally saw the first part of the video where he fell down, I'm thinking it might be just isolated ACL tear, where there's not going to be a ton of damage to the articular cartilage, which is the smooth portions of the bone that allow the bones to move so freely over each other. There's other stuff, including synovial fluid, that allow the bones to move over each other or glide. That's the stuff that gets worn down when you see arthritis later on in life. Mm-hmm. However, we don't know whether there's a damage to the articular cartilage. We don't know if there's a damage to the MCL, which is the ligament on the inside portion of the knee. We don't know if there's a damage to the meniscus. Until they look at the MRI and see what's going on, you can't really tell. Based off of the video, when we saw that where it more likely happened, which he did confirm it, I'm willing to bet that there's some type of MCL involvement. There really wasn't a rotational component to suggest meniscus, but there always can be a little bit of that. Mm-hmm. That's something they might be able to just trim out. We'll see what they do. I don't know about the articular cartilage. That's something they're going to see on the MRI. So hopefully he had just the ACL tear and little else damage, because then that'll give him a better timetable. Whereas, for example, Trent Murphy, again, he had MCL, meniscus, and ACL, which definitely is recovery more complicated. Right. So everybody's different with regards to their ACL tears. And, of course, his was direct contact, where we see a lot of more indirect contact. About 80% of those, the ACL tears, are indirect compared to the roughly 20% that are direct.
Now, as far as how this affects the Buffalo Bills, I mean, I can kind of dive into that a little bit with you here. This is not obviously, this is a real tough loss for the Buffalo Bills, because I felt like through these first 3 weeks of the season, Harrison Phillips was one of those guys that was actually mightily impressive. He impressed me as far as week to week, his progression from last year to this season, week 1, week 2, week 3. And for him to go down for the entire season is obviously not a bonus for this Buffalo Bills team, especially heading into this matchup. But not only does Buffalo have this circumstance with Harrison Phillips, but there's this lingering injury news surrounding John Feliciano, who has been a clutch performer, to say the least, on that offensive line. He's far exceeded my expectations. What have you heard about the guard for the Buffalo Bills, John Feliciano, and his injury status?
There's been a lot less information leaked out about Feliciano compared to Phillips. I mean, Phillips was out there, said what happened, and when ACLs get reported like that, people gather their information pretty quick. So that was all kind of well put out on the table there,
right.
As much as we figured out Monday and whatnot. So Feliciano, I did look at the film for this here. I think he suffered some type of whiplash injury. Like you see more like in a car accident. The reason why it is because this happened on the scoring play when Dawson Knox got his first touchdown. So I'm not always best with necessarily paying attention or noticing who's online because there's so many rotation between Cody Ford and Niseki and everybody else with that. There's always changing in and out.
Right.
However, Feliciano was on the play. He starts moving to his left. Whoever was next to him, the tackle, kind of fell on top of him, and because of the big hole, just the fake, I believe it was, one of the Bengals players came in. Feliciano's moving to his left. He gets hit real hard on the head to the right before he disappears into a bunch of bodies, and then you see the camera pan to Dawson Knox catching the touchdown. So the angle wasn't the best. But the reason why I think this is a whiplash injury was because he was seen in a neck brace right after the game and the locker room talking with people. And then today he's in practice in a limited fashion, which is very promising. And he was moving his head around. He was in a red practice jersey doing blocking drills, but he wasn't making any contact with other individuals. So that's where I think it's more like the soft tissue in the neck, sprain, whiplash, where you kind of just have to get that range of motion back and manage the pain and get full function back that way.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and I definitely enjoy, like me, I see a guy get hurt on the field, and that's one of the things I'm like, oh, he's hurt. But you, with your experience and everything that you have studied over the years, you can watch film and you can see and kind of guess, but know, and usually have it hit it right on the head of what type of injury that player suffered. And I think the Feliciano thing, I'm a little bit more optimistic about Feliciano in comparison to obviously Harrison Phillips, who we know is out for the season. But another player that I really wanted to bring up to you and kind of get your thoughts on is Devin Singletary. I mean, I've said it, since the start of the season, this Bills offense is different with Devin Singletary, and it's definitely different without Devin Singletary. For better or for worse, take your pick in certain ways. But heading into this particular matchup, Week 4, the Buffalo Bills need Devin Singletary out there, I think, against the Patriots. What have you heard about Devin Singletary's status heading into this game with the Patriots this weekend?
Once again, he's missed 3 practices last week due to the hamstring, and then he missed again today's practice. It's really hard to grade hamstring injuries on film alone. When you see a grade 3, these guys are going down. They're usually have to be helped off the field, carted off. Grade 2s, you see them really struggling, even need help with that. His might be more of a grade 1 because you see him come up lame at the end of the Giants game, and he's kind of hobbling off. Not saying grade 1 isn't an injury. It's not as severe as the other ones, but you still have to work through that. You just tend to see guys take anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks on average. I see more like 1 to 2. Depends on what they were doing, though, too, that plays into that. So the fact that he didn't practice today isn't promising, but they might have just said, hey, let's see how you do today, and then maybe work him in limited. It's really just going to be depends on how he's feeling and depends on what he is able to do. I've noticed a lot with the team, on average, most of the guys are missing about 2 games. With hamstring injuries, we've seen some guys miss more time, but it really just depends. They want to make sure that those guys are able to go through the drills at full speed and then work themselves back into the practices. I was thinking there's that chance that he could play this week. It's that probability is going down in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But if he gets out there, he's limited Thursday and Friday, there's a decent chance.
Now, since he didn't practice, today, that's obviously not a good sign. But as you said, usually the progression throughout a week of how an NFL team kind of nurses a player back to health is that they usually don't practice on Wednesdays, and then they get limited action, and then Friday they practice, and then they're limited in the game. But I think maybe I'm wrong here. I'll see if you agree with me on this. But I think with a player like Devin Singletary being how important of a player he is to the team, I almost wouldn't want to rush him back. Like I said, I know you need him in this game, but if it's going to cause long-term effects, then you obviously have to pick your poison as far as how you're going to rush a player back, or are you going to let that player actually recover from that injury, right?
I definitely think they're going to let him recover back from injury. We saw Teron Johnson. He's looking good the past 2 weeks in drills from what I've seen. Like I saw a video today. He's moving around very well when he was working with McDermott on backpedaling and moving forward, cutting everything else like that. So I think they're going to take the same approach with Singletary. Once again, he might, but the past experience and observations have shown me that they're not going to rush him back. If this was maybe playoffs or something like that, okay, you could probably go through it. But if they rush him back, then he might continue to deal with this later on in the season, and that's not the time that we want to be dealing with that. Hey, you come up for the chronic hamstring injury in week 16 with the season on line. I'd rather say sit him out now and we'll deal with this and make sure he gets healthy first.
Plus, you have a running back on your team and Frank Gore that I said in my postgame show last week that the fountain of youth chose Frank Gore. I don't think he found it. I don't think Frank Gore found the fountain of youth. I think the fountain of youth was we're gonna find him somewhere because that guy is blessed beyond belief. The injuries that he's had to come back from time and time again and to be playing at a really high level. I'm not gonna lie to you, Kyle. When the Bills brought in Frank Gore, I didn't get it at all. I was like, this move doesn't make much sense to me. I kind of blasted the move, actually, and now he's really making me eat crow. Have you been shocked by the durability and the versatility that Frank Gore still has at age 36 as a running back?
It is incredible how he moves as well as he does. He's not the shifty back we were used to seeing with McCoy, but he just gets in there and gets to the key yards and keeps moving. And it's impressive that he's able to take the hits and he's able to repair his body each week, even after, I think he's 15 years now, and he's still going after it. It is incredible. It didn't make sense at the first time when they signed him. Mm-hmm. But if we didn't have LaShawn McCoy at the time, I think it would have made more sense, or people wouldn't have been so against it or off by it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And what amazes me about him is last week he was playing in that game and his cleats were coming apart and he had tape hanging off of his cleats and he wore his cleats really, really tight and they were low cut. It was almost like he was wearing socks for cleats. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen from a football player as far as their equipment, but he makes it work. He did his thing last week.
That he did.
Yeah, but I definitely feel like this team has had less injuries early on than maybe last year, the year before. You could definitely attest to that. Would you say that they've had less injuries than usual?
I'm going to disagree with you on that. I think last year they were in really good shape. I think this year they've had more injuries. But here's the key thing. We have that depth. It's that whole mantra that McDermott says, next man up. I think if you go back 5 years and we have these injuries, like, for example, when Rex Ryan was here, these injuries would be killing us, and we'd be working with that third-string guy who had no business being on an NFL roster, at best a practice squad. And you'd be like, well, we're already going up against the Patriots week 4, and this is a lost season. Now it's like, okay, we've lost E.J. Gaines, Adrian Waddell, we've lost Teron Johnson for a few games, we've lost Harrison Phillips for a season, we've lost numerous contributors, but there's not that sense as the woe is me. It's, well, okay, this is why we have the depth. Let's just keep moving on and hope that some of those key guys do come back. Even the Tyler Kroft injury, granted, he hasn't shown anything why he needs to be on the team, and frankly, he's shown to be expendable with the emergence of Dawson Knox. However, things like that 5 years ago with Rex Ryan and Doug Whaley, it would just been, well, this season's done. We'll see you next year.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point, and I appreciate you kind of changing my thinking on that, because that's one of the things that I look at, obviously, injuries, but it's not something that I would dive into as deep as you might, and that's a credit to yourself that you dive into it deeper than anybody that I know, so you would know better than anybody how many injuries the Bills might have had last year at this point in the season compared to this year. And when you put it in perspective like that of, Teron Johnson, Harrison Phillips for this season, Devin Singletary, and some of the names that you've mentioned, the depth that Buffalo has brought on kind of shoulders the blow or weathers the storm of those injuries, so to speak. So, yeah, I agree with you. And that's a testament to Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, who the last 3 years that they've been in the building have really built this team through the draft and through free agent acquisitions. One of the acquisitions that I really liked was Kevin Johnson from the Houston Texans. Now, he had a fair share of injuries while he was with the Texans. Where do you see him kind of fitting in, on this Buffalo Bills team, and the injuries that he had? I believe he had a torn knee as well.
He had a lot going on. He had so much going on. I'd have to go back and look. I remember there was a Frank injury at one point.
Right.
He had just numerous. It seemed like his body couldn't keep up with everything. If I wasn't going to stumble over my own words, I would go look up everything from my Buffalo Rumblings articles I did on him.
Right.
He just kept on getting hit after injury after injury after injury. However, when he was with the Texans, I didn't look too much into how much he was playing, but it seemed like he was more of a starter role. Now he's here on the 1 year prove-it deal. He's in that more reserve role, which allows him to save himself a little bit. And granted, it's early in the season, but I think he's able to get the most out of his body while not pushing it to the very extremes.
Right.
And he's just getting more out of it. I'm surprised he is not injured yet, but also he's playing in depth to, Teron Johnson and, I think to a lesser extent, Tre'Davious. But, he was able to line up with Micah Hyde, tell him where to go, and he got his first sack there.
Right.
He's definitely a smart player. It just, I think he's better in limited roles and his depth. But those are the kind of guys you want sitting on your team rather than some practice squad scrub that you pulled up because you need a body.
Right. Yeah, and those are not free agents that you often get a chance to take a stab at, a former first-round pick, a guy that did have the fair share of injuries, but like you said, a prove-it deal where he's not putting his body out there like he was with Houston. So I really like that deal, and I didn't plan on asking you about him, but he just popped into my head as somebody that, wow, I mean, he had like a foot injury, a shoulder injury, a neck injury. I remember reading about him in the on the actual Buffalo Bills site when they signed him, because I remember when he was drafted, small school guy and just kind of fizzled out in Houston. But I love what he's done so far as a Buffalo Bill. But yeah, I love the injury take that you have on Phillips and on Feliciano and Singletary. But I asked the viewers and listeners of the show to kind of give me their keys to victory as we kind of segue into a little bit of a Week 4 preview here for the Buffalo Bills. Next battle, they play, obviously, they play the Super Bowl last year's Super Bowl champs, the New England Patriots. I'm not really, I hate to even give them that distinction, but it is what it is. And
that leaves a bad taste in your mouth when you say it, because I'm not even saying it, and just I get this awful, just sour taste in my mouth just thinking about
Right.
it.
It's one of those things where it's like, I hate playing the Patriots, but at the same time, if you were to gauge the identity of your team, or try to understand where your team is at as a contender or a pretender, the best way to kind of gauge that is playing the Patriots, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I don't know what better test. Every once in a while you get the team that comes off the Super Bowl win and they just stink it up the next year, and they're like, well, maybe we're not as good as we thought. But the Patriots year in, year out are that litmus test to see whether, hey, are we legit or do we need to fine-tune some stuff?
Right. So I took to Twitter as I normally do, and thank you for retweeting the tweet as well, because there were some people that tweeted on it that hadn't followed me yet, and then they're like, "Hey, we're going to follow this guy. He's a Bills guy." So much appreciated. Have to throw that out there. Much appreciated.
Of course.
So I took to Twitter and Facebook actually, and I'm going to go through everybody's responses to my tweet that said, "What are some of your keys to victory for the Buffalo Bills this week?" We'll be reading these tonight on the podcast with Banged Up Bills, Kyle Trimble. So, let's get to it. Slowest Buffalo in the herd says, pressure. The Bills have to get pressure on Tom Brady and throw him off his game, or else he will pick apart the defense just like we've watched for almost 20 years. If they can get some hands in his face, the Bills will have a lot better chance of winning. At Daniel Goodwin says, easy. Don't put up the defense in bad situations. Don't put the defense in bad situations. It was a typo on his part. A.K.A. Leotis McKelvin fumbling a punt with 3 minutes left after the D stopped him. I don't know why he would put that back into my brain. I blocked that out. The moment it happened, I walked out of that bar. I'll never forget that. Taylor Made says, please score points and use the clock effectively. Allen Season says, offense, protect the football, control the line of scrimmage, utilize the package that the Pats haven't seen yet. Defense, force turnovers, and the team needs to limit mistakes. And obviously, I think so far we could agree with those, right?
Absolutely. That covers some of the stuff I was thinking about, too. I like the heavy pressure. Just get in your face, because last time we beat them, Brady threw, 4 interceptions. So you had to force him into mistakes there. So I'm all about the pressure. I don't care if you throw blitz on every time. Make him throw that ball and make him make mistakes.
Right, and Tom Brady doesn't like to get hit. You can say what you want. You can say what you want about how great he is, and you're not wrong, but he does not like to get hit. That's the one thing. Josh Allen, I feel like sometimes I compare Josh Allen to like Arturo Gatti as a quarterback. Arturo Gatti, fighter, boxer, he would get punched in the face, and it wouldn't be like he would really be fighting until he saw himself bleeding. He was just one of those guys that was just tough as nails and wanted to just go to war. Where Tom Brady, that's not what Tom Brady is, right?
No, he definitely. Well, you hear all his reports that the refs are always saying, "Lay off the time." He's earned the ability not to get hit. However, football is a contact sport. As long as you're hitting legally, which I know we're going to get some calls on Sunday, probably from Jerry Hughes or Ed Oliver or somebody that's going to be like, come on, that wasn't a penalty. But you guys put pressure in the face, and he's going to expect that he's going to get hit, because that's just – then what are you doing playing football if you don't want to get hit?
Right, and as an injury, I really want your take on this too, because – as an injury analyst, someone that analyzes injuries and studies injuries within sports, it's got to be a little bit of a catch-22 for you, because it's like, on one hand, you want the game of football to prosper, and the NFL feels like the game will prosper by players staying healthy, the stars staying healthy, as you said, protecting guys like Tom Brady and making sure that those guys are healthy so that the fans can be entertained by a player like that. But then it's like, to me, I watch highlights of 1980s football, the 85 Bears, or the Steel Curtain, or the Purple People Eaters, and I feel like if I was a fan then, I would have enjoyed it much more than I do now. Would you share that sentiment with me?
I definitely like the violent nature of football. I think that some of those hits, just the violence of it all, definitely made football what it is. However, they are seeing more of the long-term injury impacts and what happens to it. And I understand trying to find the balance between entertainment and safety. And, we've seen some guys get, seriously hurt. I'm thinking Jack Tatum. I don't remember who he paralyzed, but this
right.
Like, come on, these guys are getting paid millions of dollars, but is anybody going to get be willing to take a few $1 million in order to get paralyzed. Like, those are kind of hits that you should try to take out or at least limit. Obviously, things like Kevin Everett, when that happened with him back in 2007, that stuff's unfortunate. But, like, think about how rare that is. The last time I can remember a hit like that is Daniel Laskow when the Bills played the Saints. He had to be stretched off, and he has to have a neck injury with that. But it's like, I want there to be a lot of physicality to it, but I don't want to see guys literally have to be,
carted off. Right.
Yeah. So
right.
I like the 70s and 80s, but there's a reason why they switched it, because guys were ending up like the Jack Tatum guy that got hit. It's like, you don't need that. You got to dial it back a little bit. And I think the football game has become much more skilled than, the just hitting people as hard as you can to make them pay for something because they wear another jersey.
Right. Would you say, though, that the NFL, like, I understand where you're coming from. Like, I don't want to see anybody, paralyzed on the field. I don't want to see anybody with, a life-lasting, injury. But at the same time, they have gone so above and beyond at completely softening the game. They've made football soft in comparison to even what it was 5-10 years ago. I mean, quarterbacks don't get hit, and we have a lot of these football analysts and stuff out there that they want to dive into statistics and say, well, Troy Aikman wasn't really a great quarterback. He maybe had 160, 170 touchdowns. Okay, that's one thing, but Troy Aikman wasn't allowed to throw the football so freely like Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are currently in this era of football, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at, for example, Tom Aikman, when they're looking at the stats, that guy, he was in a different era of football. He's lucky he can remember his last name anymore.
Right.
He's just not there anymore. That's the kind of stuff that they do want to cut back. There are some things I'm like, come on, you really let that, cut back on that, but they've seen the concussions go down. They've seen some of the other injuries go down, and like where they fine tune things. I agree. Sometimes it's a little heavy handed with some of their decisions because they're looking at the dollars and cents of that decision rather than the player's safety. But it's always that constant battle. How do we make the game safer, but allow these guys to continue playing? It's just, sometimes it's like you got to pick your battles, and I think sometimes the NFL they dictate their battle, but sometimes it's not the right battle.
Yeah, I could definitely agree to that. And when it's all said and done, a guy like Tom Brady might have every record in the book, but that's like saying Cal Ripken has the same, every record in the book, and in large part, it's due to the fact they played for so long. They were allowed to play for so long.
Yeah. I don't want to see quarterback and like our old boy Trent Edwards, who was never the same after that hit, and I believe it was a Cardinals game. But I don't want to see that happen. But it is crazy when they're getting so many protections. It's like, no wonder they're going to keep rewriting the record books. They don't get touched. It's like Father Time needs to take its toll on that. So whether you need to let them hit a little bit more on the quarterback, make sure you're hitting that at a certain level, not taking out the knees or the head. But it just seems like they do give them a little too much protection, at least on the quarterbacks, when you're looking at from the entertainment and statistical aspect of football.
It definitely goes without saying, too, that not only does Tom Brady get protected more than any other quarterback, I think even the Patriots would agree with that. But more than that, Tom Brady gets the ball out of his hand quicker than any other quarterback. So when we're diving into how can the Buffalo Bills beat the New England Patriots, and we have some of our people tweeting at me saying that they need to get to Tom Brady, it's a lot easier said than done. Nobody gets to Tom Brady, right?
Pretty much. He gets out in what, like they said, 2 seconds or something crazy like that.
Right.
You have an offensive line, but also know where that guy's going to be at and know that you don't have to scramble like Josh Allen does. Yeah, you're going to get out quicker. However, that goes back to that pressure where you might not get to him, but you can certainly show differences with defense to make him confused or not be sure what he's looking at or get the hands up. I mean, how many times do you see Lorenzo Alexander or Harrison Phillips or any other guys, they just get their hands up and they just manage to tip that ball or bat it away. Like, even if he gets the ball out fast, all you got to do is get that hand up. You know,
right.
He's not going to throw it through anybody's hand.
And based on the way a football is thrown and delivered, if a D lineman tips it, it's going up right up in the air. I mean, that's just the laws of physics, I guess, with a football. But yeah. I think that this game is winnable, Kyle. I call me crazy, you know, but I think this game is winnable. You look at the Patriots' schedule so far. Have they faced a defense like Buffalo's?
No, not even close.
Right.
They've had cupcakes.
What's that?
They've had cupcakes. They've had the Steelers, which has probably been the best defense so far, and then I believe they've had Miami and New York Jets. Like, that's not.
I don't even think they've faced the best offense yet. I think the Bills. No. I think the Bills' offense is better than those teams that you've just mentioned.
Yeah, once again, Steelers are probably the best offense, and look, we saw how that happened on. The opening week of the season.
Yeah,
garbage.
What was it, 30-3? If I'm not mistaken, something like that. I tend to think that Josh Allen, just physically being as gifted as he is, would allow that offense to get more than 3 points. I just tend to think that. And as I mentioned, the guy that discovered the fountain of youth, Frank Gore. I mean, that guy is just phenomenal. And as far as this Bills team and their 3-0 start, what has impressed you? What has impressed you the most?
The fact that they can come back from a deficit. You know, the Jets game, they were down 16-0 and came back and kept on just chugging along. The Giants game didn't really ever scare me, but they let them get back into it, but they pulled away. The fact that they went down after letting the Bengals get back into it and come back. I mean, that's not Buffalo Bills from a few years ago, 10 years ago. There's a different mentality to that, hey, we might be down, but we're not out yet. Before, we give up a late score. Well, okay, let's leave. We're not going to be able to see a win here.
Right.
That's the biggest thing is the grit that they have. They're going to say, forget it. We don't care if we're down. We're still going to try to get every score, and that's why you get to 3-0. Otherwise, they'd probably be 1-2 at best. That's what that's the difference there.
And I think if they'd have gone 1-2 through these first 3 weeks of the season, it would have really changed the whole mindset of the team. Now that they are 3-0. Heading into this Patriots matchup, people can say whatever the heck they want, that momentum in a locker room doesn't exist. If you've ever been in a locker room, you would know that it does exist. Momentum is a real thing. I can speak to it that the sports teams that I played on, if we beat teams that we weren't supposed to beat, and if we beat them convincingly, the whole morale of the team was different. What do you say to that?
I 100% agree with you on that. I'm thinking with the whole cultural thing, go back to the momentum. It's like, I know you can't quantify that, but there's something to it there. There's something when guys are all on board, they just realize, hey, we can do this. We're talented enough. It's amazing the opposite side, too. If you get down, you're thinking, man, how am I ever going to get back into this? And it's really a big mind game there. But that's the big thing is they get some momentum behind them. They realize, hey, we are just as good, if not better than these guys. There's no reason why we can't win. And that's part of the culture that McDermott has built. It's just, that could be a whole other hour of podcast. I won't even get into that.
I agree with you.
From the wrestling standpoint of everything, I think we touched on this briefly before, but there's something there, and that's why they're able to build up momentum, even though they go down, 17-14, or they're down 16-0. That's why they're able to get back into it, because they have that culture to regain the momentum and get back and win the game.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it is solely on the shoulders of Sean McDermott, the Buffalo Bills head coach. And I've said this to a lot of people that know I have a podcast, but maybe they don't listen to every single episode. But then they ask me, what's my Bills take in a random setting? I could be in Walmart and run into somebody, and they say, what do you think of this week's game? And I say, one thing I do know, win, lose, or draw, I'm more confident that they'll be prepared to win than I've ever been in my generation. I was pretty young when Marv Levy was leading them to the 4 straight Super Bowls, but Sean McDermott, I would say, is the closest thing to Marv Levy since Marv Levy, right?
Absolutely. I don't think there's anybody close. The only one I could think of at all, and this is a long stretch with Shane Gailey because he was starting to build something there, but he's still light years behind anybody, between Levy and McDermott.
Right, and I liked Wade Phillips too. I think the players liked him, but it was just one of those things where that decision to start Johnson over Flutie by Ralph Wilson made things kind of at odds with him and the organization, and that was just a mess. But Kyle, as far as your expectations for this game, how do you see this game going down to wrap up the show tonight?
Small part of me says it's going to be a blowout one side or the other, but I really don't think it's going to happen because with seeing how we've played them in past years, like we lost 25-6 to them on Monday Night Football last year, and that game was a lot closer than the final score, and we had Derek Anderson leading everything. Right. So with how anemic that offense was last year, that's why I think it's going to be a lot closer. It could come down to a field goal. It might come down to one score. Regarding, actually, a touchdown would be more than one score there. But it's going to come down to it's going to be on your edge of your seat at the very end. It's not going to be let's hang this up and call it a day. I could see it coming down to like what it was in 2011 when we beat them. I was at the stadium working, and it was just electric in there. I mean, if that happens again, I don't know that we're gonna get them to. We're not gonna beat Belichick at his own game like Gailey did that day. But if they manage to beat them, close score, or winning field goal, or something like that, I think New Era Stadium might explode.
I couldn't agree more. And I know one thing: if they go 4-0 and they beat the Patriots in their house, there's no telling what could happen the rest of the season. It's one of those wins. I was listening to the John Murphy show throughout the afternoon, bits and pieces today, and the main question was: is this win a defining win for the Bills if they can pull it off? You're damn right it is. You're damn right it is. If the Buffalo Bills, who didn't even make the playoffs last year, went 6-10, host the Patriots and stomp them in their own house, or even squeak by, that's a defining win. That's a character building win and a win that is a team builder, no doubt about it. So I agree with you. I think it's going to be a real close game. I think it could be 27 Patriots, 23 Bills, or vice versa. I don't think this is a game that is out of the realm of possibility that Buffalo can't win. They have no shot. Let the national media say whatever they want. They said what they wanted about Josh Allen last year, and that hasn't worked out too well for them so far. So we'll end it with that.
I agree. And I'm thinking, I listened to the John Murphy show today, too, a little bit. I think that they clarified. They said there was a defining win for 2019. It was going to make the season, and a lot of people were disagreeing with that. So I think it's a defining win to say this is where you're at as a team, but that's not going to make your season there because you still have to go out and win another 12 games if that's the case there, or whatever the 12 games left there. So,
right.
Yeah, but either way, I mean, it's going to be. I can only imagine what it's going to be like. I'm not going to be able to get to go to the game on Sunday, but, man, imagine if you're there.
Oh, my God, I couldn't imagine. Yeah, and maybe not in the sense of – because you do got to – each opponent, week to week, you got to take it week to week, but just mentally for this team, if they were able to get over that hump and beat the Patriots, it would be pretty massive.
Anything can happen.
Right.
Anything can happen. AFC East champs, baby.
Right, AFC's champs. Why not Buffalo, right? Why not?
Absolutely.
And New England's going to try to take over the New Era field, and we're not going to let them. I think this is going to be a dogfight, and I can't wait for Sunday. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me on the show. Greatly appreciate your time. Look forward to talking to you again. Hopefully we don't have to talk about too many injuries this year. We can just talk about Buffalo Bills football.
We can only hope.
We can only hope. Take care, buddy.
All right, thank you, too.
Take care. Kyle Trimble, ladies and gentlemen, on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. You can subscribe to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Apple Podcasts. Follow the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on Spotify. And follow me on Instagram, too. I've been posting some sports takes on Instagram that people have really enjoyed. So there you have it. I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast as I was joined by BangedUpBills.com Kyle Trimble. You can follow him on Twitter at BangedUpBills. Heck of a guy, great guest, and very informative. It's good to know that Feliciano is a possibility for this week. Devin Singletary, we'll find out. Nonetheless, let's go Buffalo this Sunday. Thomas Takeover postgame show live in Studio D. Take care, everybody.